Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney. I am the president of Trekell Art Supplies, and we're super excited to have our pro team artist, Todd Casey, here with us today. And he's going to go over how to set up a still life and then jump into a contest that he actually came up with the idea of hosting through Trekell. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Todd. So go ahead, Todd.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking Friday happy hour time to come in and see my presentation. Why don't I just jump right into it, because it pretty much should explain everything. What I'm going to do at the beginning is just do a quick slideshow. Well, actually, it's never quick, a slideshow. And then I'm going to stop and play a little bit of a video. And then we're going to go back to a slideshow to announce the still life. So let me cue that up, and then I'll introduce myself and Kalina. Kalina, anything? Oh, okay. Give me 1 second.
You're doing great, Todd. You're doing great.
Kalina's my partner in crime. So, all right, everyone. So again, thanks for coming. Thank you to Trekell for hosting this as well. My name's Todd Casey. Looks like I need to update my photo and put some glasses on there and add 20 pounds of COVID weight. This is Kalina, my monitor extraordinaire. So she's going to be working with us today, and she'll be answering questions in the chat and then directing some of those questions over. Please ask questions in the chat during the presentation. We're usually really good about getting back. During the video, I should be able to respond to some questions as well. So the reason why we put this together is today's the 2-year anniversary of the artist still life. So Courtney and I were speaking, and we want to do something special. So what I'm going to do is give a presentation and then announce the competition. The webinar, what I'm going to be going over, how I set up a still life, and then announcing the competition, as I said. The general format of this is at the end, I'm going to also give away, we're going to announce one winner will be selected to receive a Trekell Oil Prime Linen ACL panel, and also one of my brush sets. I believe this is the brush set that they're giving away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a slideshow on how I set up a painting. It's going to be roughly 30 minutes. These minutes are rough. We'll watch a video on me setting up a still life. It's actually about 30 minutes. Then we'll go over the still life competition, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for the Q&A. So why don't we jump into the artist still life. So what I'm going to do is just show some of the pages here from the book and how I begin setting up a painting. So the way in which I put the book together was with the idea that I can't just jump right into showing painting. I couldn't just jump right into a demonstration. So I figured I would start at the beginning, which is setting up materials, tools, and studio space. So some of the biggest questions that I get as an instructor are, how do I set up my studio? And that's really, I think, where the magic is. Setting up a studio will help you make it so that you can control the light, which is why still life is a great place to begin after coming out of an atelier or any kind of art school. So here I am in my studio over here. I usually have one light on my setup, and then I have one light on my easel. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit, but I'm just going to go through parts of the book right now. The other thing is I have multiple light sources in my studio. I paint under warm light, 3300 Kelvin. I used to paint at nighttime when I used to have a full-time job during the day. And I was always told that I was supposed to paint in natural light, but painting at nighttime, I never had natural light. So I figured out ways, tips, and tricks to kind of get around that. Avoid raking light at all costs if you can. It'll actually make your surface look darker. Again, if you have questions during this, write them down or ask them in the chat. We should be able to get to them. So one thing to keep in mind always is that the cone of vision when we're setting up is 55 to 60 degrees. And what that means is if you take the height of the largest vertical height of the setup, you want to be back at least 3 times that to avoid distortion. So here I am sitting, setting up in my studio. I paint on an open box M, which is a pochade box. It has the palette attached to it, but I can also close it. We have a 3-year-old here, and she loves to put her fingers in everything. So it helps for me to contain the paints in there and also make my studio space pretty safe. So the next question I always get is, what do I paint? And that's where, this chapter in the book was hoping to inspire people. So beginning with what has been painted throughout the history, we had Gabriel Weisberg write for the book. He's written about 20 to 30 books on the French academic painting, and he was awesome. He was at the beginning of the book. So when we got to this, this beautiful painting by Emil Carlson's son, Dines Carlson, who most people have not even heard of, is in, I believe, the Indianapolis Museum of Art. And I thought, what a gorgeous painting. He was inspired by Whistler. I'm connected to Whistler because I'm born in Lowell, Massachusetts. That's where James McNeill Whistler was born. So there was a lot of ties back to a lot of things threading back together in the book. So what I wanted to do was offer just a bunch of different ideas of what to paint. Of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because there could be a whole book on just what that is. So for me, I always have a story involved. If you ever took one of my classes, I usually jump into what the story of this is, but not enough time to tell that long story. But what I also wanted to do is bring in a lot of old master artwork and also living contemporary artists as well. So this is Jeffrey Larson, and he's painting just a simple tricycle, but he's basically taking and flipping it over and making it much more interesting. This is Kate Lehman, just painting something looks like in the kitchen, like an old scale, which is pretty awesome. I was a mailman for a year of my life. My dad was a mailman for about 25 years. So when it came time to trying to find things that I really wanted to paint, I had a deep connection to some of this stuff. And then here we have the Dutch. That's Willem Kleis, which the Dutch are always great to look at. Another one, Willem Kalf. Of course, Chardin, who's considered the daddy of still life painting. And then we have just a simple still life of just some fruit and vegetables. What are you laughing at, Kalina?
The daddy of still life painting?
He's like the first.
You have a kid at home.
I know. All right. Abbott Henderson Thayer. Here's some beautiful flowers. And then we have Paul Seaton, an English artist who's just fantastic. He was on the backside of the book too, because I just absolutely love his paintings. So what I was trying to do is pepper in the book all different ideas, contemporary, old master, and then just give everybody all this information, and not to tell anybody that they have to paint anything, but more of just here's some things that have been painted in the past. So birds and game, some people don't like to look at paintings of birds and game. Some other common narratives were Vanitas, which is really having to do with the mortality of us as human beings, that we're all going to die someday. And then taking and juxtaposing some trompe-l'oeil paintings like the William Arnett on the left with the Tony Surinai on the right, similar in composition, but different in subject matter. And then this is a good friend of mine, Rodney Davis, and he likes to paint. I think this one's a gift from Aphrodite. So this is almost like the before and the after, in which the rose got its color. So I put these two together and spread in the book. And then there's also still life in interiors, which is kind of where still life was born out of. You can look, there was actually a painting that was supposed to be in the book. I think it was by Diego Velázquez, that we ended up pulling at the last second, but it's kind of like still lifes are in these paintings in the corners where we have little bottles and setups and stuff. And then Fontaine Latour, who kind of bridged that gap between a lot of interior and still life as well, which are obviously gorgeous. So when it comes to thinking about still life, contemporary would be more poppy colors, and the classical would be more of, or perhaps traditionally more of darker colors. So there's a good juxtaposition of Francois Bonvin, who Gabriel Weisberg talked about in the beginning of the book, and then one of mine. Now I put mine in the book a lot, not because I have a big ego, but it was more of, I had a small amount of time to put the book together. I wish I could have gotten more artists in the book, but I had four months to put the whole thing together. Recommended props, good place to start is just some fruit. This is actually a fake fruit that I got, I think, at Michael's or Joanne Fabrics or something, or bought it online. And they make fake fruit and vegetables look so good these days that they won't wilt. So they're a good place to begin. And then this gorgeous painting here by Hannah Brownskiel, which I found, which is just like a beautiful basket of fruit. I go into like details of like how I work out ideas as well. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll work out paintings. Either you find an object, which was the story at the beginning of the Mexican figurines playing the music, or what I'll do is I'll come up with a word and then I'll kind of play off of it and do a word list. So there's many different ways to work out ideas, and I encourage my students to always do both of these. So here's just me doing some thumbnails. Here's James Gurney, one of like the artists that I admire. And he goes to like diners and stuff like that. And he's just always coming up with ideas of paintings. Some of this information ends up in the background of his paintings too. I don't think I've seen gumballs in the background, but maybe I haven't looked hard enough. So ways to get inspired in the book. I like to do, I worked at Ralph Lauren for about 10 years of my life. And what we would do is we would kind of put everything up on the wall, and then we'd work visually, and then we'd pull from that wall, which is still the way that I do it now. So if I get a tear sheet or a magazine and I see something that inspires me, I throw it up on the wall. Now, it's not that I want to do a copy of it or a version of it. I really just want to sit with it and then see what through osmosis can kind of make its way into my work. So take your time when composing. I like to do a lot of studies. So these are 2 studies at the top for the painting that was on the bottom right, 3 studies actually. And this evolved, I think it was over something like 3 or 4 years it took me to do this. I can't remember. I think the accuracy of the stories in the book. But I didn't love, there was actually 2 other studies that I did that I didn't love. And then it took time to really gather all the right components and kind of put it together. And of course, I throw in Seth Godin, the purple cow idea. Now, Seth Godin's like a marketing genius. And basically he said that if you drove by, and you were on the highway and you saw a bunch of cows, you probably wouldn't stop and look. Maybe you would. But if you did see a purple cow, you'd probably stop and look. And to be that purple cow in your work, it's something that stuck with me from one of my now friends, Thomas Fluharty, when I went and saw him when I was just out of, a little past undergrad. I went and I showed him one of the paintings that I did, and he just kind of was like, you basically did what I would expect anybody to do. So I was like, what do you mean? And then he told me the story of the purple cow, and then I bought the book, and then he really changed my way of thinking, which is just, if you're going to do something, if you do something a little bit differently, it could just be unique and a little bit more interesting. So composing, once you have your idea of what it is you want to paint, once you gather your ideas, now you collect your props and how do you put them together? So creating unity is, of course, what's desired. And I love this quote by Harvey Dunn. You must make the main thing of the picture appear most important. If anyone tells me my hat is the most important thing, important than my head, by God, I'm taking off my hat. So when I actually went to the Academy of Art University in San Francisco for grad school, I never finished. I'm actually back in it now, completing it. So the thing that they teach us there was more of like a design oriented. They're like a film animation school, and I actually went for animation. And what they were teaching us was the 7 principles by Maitland Graves, who was actually a designer. And it's not so much with grids and things like that, which there's plenty of books on sacred geometry, which are gorgeous and wonderful. But what I wanted to offer in the book was maybe just something a little bit different of an opinion based off of my training at the Academy of Art, which I found super important. So symmetry, try to avoid symmetry where you have a composition right down the middle of a page. Try to create asymmetry in your work. And of course, this is the 3 types of symmetry, which is symmetry, asymmetry, and then radial symmetry. Radial symmetry, we don't see so much in Western culture. We see it more in Eastern culture with mandalas. And you can see right here, the Met has this one right here, which is absolutely gorgeous. So that's the first kind of like principle. I'm glad they actually says principle and not rules, because sometimes the word rule can actually get in the way of, can kind of handcuff us. So avoid symmetry, go for asymmetry. Second, think about movement. And this is where I studied a lot of the illustrators back in the day. how can you move the eye through a piece? And again, it ties back to the Academy of Art University, where the Academy was pushing for film animation, get the audience involved in the shot or the painting or the picture, or whatever you're doing. So you can see right here what I'm trying to do with this painting called The Entomologist. This was the study for it. I was trying to push, the story began with me going down, I think to either get the mail or take the garbage out. And there was a cicada sitting in my driveway. And I took it inside because I wasn't familiar all that much with cicadas. And then it sat in my studio and I kind of built a story around it. So it's one of the like after things that you see in this painting, but it's actually being pushed. I'm trying to push the eye to see it, even though it's not like the first thing that you're going to look at. The next would be pattern and repetition. And then, when you're repeating objects and elements in a painting, you can see this beautiful painting up here by Carol Broman, where she has stars from the flag, but then also a starfish. So we have a connection between the words, but we also have a connection between the stars on the flag and also a starfish. Those also help with unity, and really, like unity is what we're hoping for. The other thing is this beautiful painting at the bottom by Travis Schlott. So you can have unity also with brushstrokes as well. So it's not always just like a repetition of shapes like stars. It could also be brushstrokes that kind of bring it together as well. So there are many different facets and ways to kind of think of this stuff. Emphasis or hierarchy. I put these in as more of like big dominant shapes, especially coming from a fashion background. We were all into color blocking and things like that. And I actually think of the background here of the Irish flag as like color blocking on a shirt. But you can see that there's dominant shapes going on here. We have we have basically a triangle, and then we have another triangle in the background of this Cape Codder. This obviously a big triangle, and then the Emil Carlson, we have the circle in the background. So what are you laughing at, Kalina?
Those were rectangles, Todd.
Rectangles. What did I say? Square?
Triangles.
All right. Comedy hour with Kalina and Todd. All right, so then we have the high contrast focal point, which is another way to kind of bring the eye to, and high contrast is usually where the eye is going to go into the picture first, but also or high chroma can sometimes jump over and grab your attention. So you actually see them both over here in this image called to have. And the red actually is going to pull your eye quickly. So it's not always that everybody, and I actually end the chapter with this, it's not that everybody is going to view everything the same way either. There was a study by, I think it was Alfred Yerbis in the 50s or 60s, in which he basically took and he put people, sat them in a chair and tried to do image eye tracking to see where they would start and where their eye would end. And you'd see that everybody had a different way in which they went into a picture. So the best we can do is hope that they go in. Most people generally may go into the high contrast, depending on how big the high contrast is. And as you can see here with the Fontaine Latour, gorgeous painting at the Met, the eye starts at the flowers and then that will move to the pear. And then, of course, contrast is another good thing. So we have a large jug by Sadie Valeri, and then we have this little shell as well. So that nice contrast. There was another painting in here we had to edit by Ted Minoff. He had this huge salt and pepper shaker. It was like a huge pepper shaker and a tiny little salt. It was super, super funny, but we ended up having to edit. So again, high contrast and also color and movement. So we can see the movement and color contrast all through here in this Josh LaRock beautiful painting. And then we see this John Spandevelt. I don't know if I said that right, but there's unity between the elements of the color and also contrast between organic and then also metal and silver as well. So many different ways of studying paintings, and I love to look at the old masters for sure. Then there's rhythm. So we have Hofstad Pushman on the left, and Pushman is basically taking these elements of the figure in the foreground, and then the rhythm is that they're similar in the background, but they're not the same. So we kind of get this rhythmic quality through the painting. And then unity or harmony, Justin Wood, this beautiful lemon painting that he did connection between color and also repetition of shapes as well. Of course, there's many other ways to think about composition as well. This is Tony Surinai, and he does it with color. Same with this beautiful Carlo Russo, where they're basically using a dominant color to kind of harmonize the painting. So then there's depth in painting as well. It's another way to kind of get that almost like magic trick, as I usually call it, in the painting. And that's to put dark in the background and then light comes forward and dark recedes for the most part in still life painting. A little different from what happens in landscape. Of course, there's also point of view. We have a trompe-l'oeil here by Anthony Wachulis, gorgeous painting, which is more of like a chalkboard and it's very flat, as opposed to the other Julian Alden Ware that we have there. So we have a little bit more depth in here than we do in the other one. So point of view in a composition is always important as well. We have this beautiful Sadie Valeri, which is kind of eye level. I think it's very common for most still life painters to do this level. Chardin did it all the time. And then we can fly almost like in a drone up over the top. And this Kate Lehman shows it. A friend of mine, Sarah Sedgwick, does it all the time too, where she's always like looking down at all her subjects. And then you can also do it from the bottom, and each one of these has a psychological component as well. This is a Jeff Larson in the top left. So doing it from the bottom is almost like you're kind of looking up to someone like a king or a queen and praising them. Use of light to compose. I love to use light to compose. Some people have like a fixed light or a window that they use, but it's one of the reasons why I just love to have my lights on a tripod. I actually have a light that goes all the way from 2300 Kelvin all the way up to 6800 Kelvin. So I get the full spectrum of warm or cool or middle. I can get neutral light if I want to as well. And you can see that I actually played with it here. I call this the creature double feature kind of lighting, where it's from the bottom, and it was actually an accident. I think I accidentally hit my light because I'm clumsy like the rest of my family, and the light spun upside down and it was shot up. And then I was like, well, that's kind of cool, because with the pumpkin, it can kind of bring those two things together. And if you've seen creature double feature, of course, it would make sense. So there are also things, the rule of thirds is always good. It's in everyone's phone. It's a good way to kind of begin thinking about how to compose. It's not so much a rule, and I think some people actually get bent about the word rule. It should just be like, here's just an idea. And the reason why this is good or interesting is that, if you don't know how to compose and you're just starting out, like, for instance, if I gave my camera to my mom and I said, take a picture of me and get the Statue of Liberty in the background, she may take my head and crop it in the corner so that she can get all of the Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty. I said Liberty. But what we can do is if we focus, these are called PowerPoints. So if we took a grid and we just put two lines on it horizontally and vertically, where they overlap is what's called the PowerPoints. And if we can generally pull the eye, put the focal point in one of those, you pull them into the composition rather than lead them out of the composition. So it, again, shouldn't be called a rule. I think I actually put that somewhere in here too, that we said it should just be like a general thing to help you. Always have to think about how you're going to frame it. Of course, most people think about it at the end. I actually think about it at the beginning. You'll see in my video of me setting up. Once I get the composition, then I take it into Photoshop, and I use Photoshop as a way to kind of compose. So you're going to lose it for the rabbit of a frame where it has to sit in the frame so it doesn't fall out. So you're going to lose another 1/4 of an inch. And there's a quote by Dean Cornwell where he said, if you're all about composition and haven't considered where your signature is, it could throw the whole composition off. So I like to think of kind of like every little aspect from the beginning. Compositional formats, you can paint and everything, especially for the still life competition. There's no format really, but here's just some general ones. A lot of, I think, still life paintings are generally horizontal. I think a lot of mine are too. I never thought about it until I think someone told me. But I also do a bunch of verticals, of course, because I do a lot of drink paintings. You can do circles, you can do squares, you can do very long triangles. This one is a 16:9 to kind of be similar to the way in which we see film. Tangents are something I would try to avoid. And what I mean by tangents is this right here. When two things are sharing an edge, it actually creates tension. So the best thing to do is to overlap them or give them a bit more space. And the same also right here. You don't want to have like an edge like that right on the side of the board or the picture. So what I do is either push it in or out. You can totally have stuff go off your picture, but just be aware that, you don't want to create tension. And then also aligning them vertically. If you want to create more space, pushing them back will actually create a bit more of that space. Composing the series, here's another one too, where if you kind of group everything in the top left, we have no reason to look at the rest of the composition, but if you space them out, you'll actually have a nice reason to kind of move through it. Composing a series, I don't think anyone's going to compose a series, but if you are thinking about eventually having a show at a gallery, how do they all fit together? You can't do the same. I mean, you could, but I try to avoid doing the same composition over and over and over. And that's where it's like, these are kind of mixed and matched and thought about that way when I compose. And then the pictures, your stages is more of like the narrative side that I like to go into. And what I try to think of is like, it's a stage, there's a main character, there's this supporting cast, figure out what the main character is, figure out what the supporting cast is, and then the lighting. So if we were to go watch Phantom of the Opera and, the Phantom is singing or Christine is singing, they're going to be in the spotlight, right? Nobody's ever, well, maybe there is, but for the most part, you want the main character to be in the spotlight and then the supporting cast in the background. So it's a little bit on the dramatic side. But that's what I like to think about is like, let's think about what this painting is about and what role do I want this object to play in it. There it is, guidelines, not rules. So basically not saying anything is typically a rule. And I actually mentioned Alfred Jervis in the text there. Exercise for me is just to sketch these things out. You can come up with ideas before you have an object or after you have an object. But sometimes it's we can be dominated by what we see up in front of us, and then we almost feel like everything is there. So why would we need to compose when if you can basically take and compose in a sketchbook, it's different. It's a different way of kind of putting it together, and you may actually lead yourself outside of the kind of little box that you already have, still like a shadow box. So I paint it mostly in the indirect method. That's what I show in the book. But I also paint in the direct method as well. And I show it in my classes, a mix of the two. Here's the indirect method, which is what I'm going to show today in the demonstration video. So in the top left, that's my drawing. And next thing that I'll do is a grisaille. This is monochromatic underpainting in burnt umber. And then I build it up in stages until the final painting is on the bottom right. This is more of like a general way of thinking about it. Underpainting, first pass of paint, final pass. Not every pass of paint is going to be the same amount. I actually think at the beginning, I'm covering everything, and then I'm doing less with every little step. It's almost like if you could take a sheet of glass and separate them, you'd see that there's probably less notes at the end where you're just getting things in the right place. So again, there's the drawing. What I do is I'll take that drawing and then I'll transfer it over by putting some I'll put some burnt umber or raw umber on the back of a printout, and then I will tape it to a panel and then trace it over like a stylus with a red pen. So here's my setup for that painting. This is me in my studio, or my studio setup, or my old one. And I have a curtain right here on my side of the for just the painting, and then I have a second light on the other side of that curtain just for the setup. They're the same Kelvin bulb so that I don't have a variation of color. So when I hold it in the same light, I'm going to get I should be trying to get as close as I can to the color if that's what I desire. Here it is, painting. I paint mostly from life. There are a few times when I couldn't get a prop and had to paint from a photo. So here it is in the just past the grisaille stage into the first pass. And then I'm starting to refine some objects. like the whiskey, or no, this was brandy. And then just starting to move through the painting and build it up. I'm talking a lot. Guess I'm supposed to. So there's the final painting. And then I always do a little study. It's not that small. I don't know why the JPEG's so small. And of course, this is my palette. So my palette, I get a lot of questions about my palette and what colors that I use. The way that I set it up, I have titanium white over here. I use either a warm white or a flake white. They're both on the warm side. Naples yellow extra, cad yellow lemon, and you can see the way in which it's set up is almost like a color wheel. So I come out of yellow, like my yellow white, into yellow, and then raw umber is associated with the yellow green. Transparent earth red is pretty much a dark orange. Burnt umber is a red orange. So I'll take my oranges and my reds and kind of pull them together right here. And then next on the color wheel from red is violet. So I have either a alizarin crimson. I've actually just started to switch it out with a alizarin claret or permanent alizarin, PR 177, manganese violet, and then into my violet blues. So violet gray, I think it's pale violet now. That was the old one. Cobalt blue, ultramarine blue. And my palette changes all the time. I was actually painting yesterday and I was like, I think I'm going to switch 2 or 3 of these colors out to see what this other color is going to do. Ivory black I put with my blue because it's actually a dark purple blue. Cad chartreuse is what I used to use. I've used cad green by Gamblin. Now I've been using cadmium green pale, but they're all these small shifts in color space. Cinnabar green medium, and then Viridian. I actually am probably going to change the Viridian out to cobalt green now because cobalts dry really fast. So there's a ton of components when it comes to color, which we can talk about color too, if we want to. As most of you probably already know, I wrote a book on color and I dork out about it every week in my color wheel class. All right, so let's get to the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I set up a still life painting from the beginning, and then I'm going to do a quick time lapse of just how I take it through to the end so you can see it. So let me cue up that video. And then we'll watch it. All right. Kalina, you can see it? Cool. All right. So the video is about 30 minutes.
Hey everyone, I figured I'd start by showing everyone how I set up.
Ask me questions in the chat because I'm going to be live in the chat while you all watch the video. All right.
Studio. So here's a shot of it. I have 3 setups in my studio. I don't imagine everyone will have the space for that, but I like to have multiple projects going at one time. That just makes it so I can think about one for a while before I start painting. Here I have my shadow box to help contain the light. Inside my shadow box is my still life. Next we have the standing light. You can use natural light if you want to, but standing light makes so I can control it. You want to be aware that our cone of vision is 55 to 60 degrees. So you want to take the height of your setup and then go be back at least 3 times that. And that just makes it so there won't be any distortions when you're drawing or painting. Next, we have my chair where I'm sitting, which is dictated by that. And then lastly, I'll throw up what's sometimes referred to as a flag. You can even just call it a curtain. And that will take it and make it so that I can contain the light in the still light for shadow box, but also I can contain it so that I have 1 light on my setup and then 1 light on my easel. All right, so today what I'm going to do is show how I set up my still life, but I wanted to start with how I set up my space as well. I use a shadow box, but I use a very loose shadow box. What I mean by that is I really just get these wine crates that I picked up at the wine store and use those as a way to kind of contain the light, which is a great thing to keep to think about. So I have one on each side. That makes it so that the light It's contained into this somewhat box. And then what I'll do is I'll start to build into it. And I'll show you a couple tricks and techniques and things like that to also contain the light even more if you need. So what I like to do is I have a bunch of different boxes around here. Today I'm going to just use the wine box. I'm going to put a third one at the bottom here. What that is I'm going to set my still life up on this. I'm not going to paint it, but you can also add more things to this as well because it's a box and it's a specific color. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll paint different sides of it. That will just give me a bit more of options to, you know, do I want a darker ground? Do I want a lighter ground? The other thing I'll do is I'll pick up boards. So this is just a piece of plywood cut down. I have one edge unfinished here, and then I have an edge finished here. So I have two different colors. And then what that'll do is make it so I can put it right on the top. And then what I'll do is just flush it with that edge there. Now you can see I have a nice dark top and kind of like a lighter mid-tone plane here. Next, what I want to do is take and arrange the objects. But before we do that, just talk about this. These are foam core boards. I usually take a foam core board and I cut it in half. You can see I just cut it right down the center there. So the reason why I do that is I put them up over the top here. And what that does is it helps me to start to contain the light even more. And really that's kind of box effect that we're talking about now. So you can kind of look in there. Show a couple ways to play with it in just a minute. So now that I have an idea of what I want to paint, today I'm going to paint or set up a martini or compose it. I want to kind of put everything out. So I've done a bunch of cocktail paintings in the past. I know I want to do a martini painting as a demonstration. I know I almost always put cocktail napkins in because it's a cocktail and also it gives a little bit of a pop of color. I have a jigger here, which is really just how you measure alcohol. I think it's 1 ounce here, 2 ounces there. Then we have just a little mixer. I'm going to just place all of my stuff out and then I can edit after. So also, I know I want to do a dirty martini. So I'm going to have a little jar here in case I want to fill it. Then I also have a jar of olives. I also have a jar of large olives. Then I have another jar just in case we want to go overboard here and put a ton of olives out. Now the other thing I have is, you know, a component that we need in a martini is that we need vodka. Now, you don't have to go out and buy vodka. I usually, this is kind of like the trick. I think of it almost like commercial photography. I really just need a liquid that looks like vodka. So no need to waste good alcohol. We can use water. So I fill this mini growler up with just some water. And what I'm going to do is add it as the liquid in this. I'm not going to use it as a design element, but that's like one of the small little tricks that I usually do. All right, so once you I'm going to compose a little bit here, but also just want to show more about tricks in environment, things like that. I just put this on the napkin, almost like it's being served to the person who's about to drink it. We'll put the jigger a little close to it. Not quite sure. I want the shaker. You know, there's always shaken or stirred in terms of like a martini, but I think for this one, we're going to go with just stirred. Although I don't have a stirring spoon, sometimes I will put them in. I'm going to bring this in because, you know, I think I'm going to fill this with olives. I've done it a few times in paintings, and I actually like the look of it. So almost like a celebration of olives. Really for the dirty lover, dirty martini lover. So here what I'll do is I'll pour some of that liquid in there. What I'll do is I'll also pour some in the martini glass. Now I'm gonna top this off with some water because I feel that's just way too yellow. What I'll start to do is pull this up. See if I can get olives out. But the brine is really what's going to give it that kind of look that these are a yellow or yellow-green liquid rather than just clear. So I'm going to use the water, but also put it into the brine. So, like I said, I got a second one here because I just don't know. Sometimes I'll put them in a bowl, and I'd rather not have to run back to the grocery store, which is the first thing I did today. Run to the store, get the olives, kind of plan what I wanted to paint, and then start to compose everything together. Go. We have this lover of olives. Perhaps the jar is a little closed. I'm not quite sure yet. I'll have to get in there and kind of play around with it. We're going to put one in there. Depending on the bartender, sometimes it's good luck to have one or three. I'm just going to pour the rest with water. You can see it's got a nice little yellowish color to it. These jars would take it somewhere else if I use them as components in the painting. I don't think I really want it. I don't want it to be it's not an advertisement for Goya. It's really more about a dirty martini and then just the celebration of the olive and the love for olives. So there we go. And next what I'll do is I'll usually grab one or two and then place them almost like this person. Perhaps they had 2 olives, maybe it was 3 that they had, and then you could get a toothpick if they had just pulled it off. One thing I recommend too is to paint in verbs, meaning like you're expressing an action that happens, so it's not so, I hate to say boring, but you want to think about something like somebody just left the scene, the authenticity of it. So there's what I have. Again, the shaker could take it somewhere else, and then you may take it into, if you're looking for a collector to buy this, you may be taking it into a different place where then it's like, is it shaken or stirred? Right now, I don't have either of those 2 here. So perhaps any dirty martini lover could buy this at this point. All right, so another thing I want to talk about is just the playing with color. So the background right now is beautiful. It's actually nice and gray, and it's a nice neutral palette. I can either go visually with what I see here, or I could probably extend this down and make it dark. I'll probably do that. But what I do is, another trick is to take foam core boards. This is just a piece of foam core bought at a local arts and crafts store. And then what I'll do is just paint it with acrylic paint, it's purple. And then I'm just going to put it right in the background. And then I'm going to sit back and take a look at what it does to the painting. Is it better? Is it worse? Does the purple add to it? Does it take it away? Is the focus on the purple now? Really, the question is like, what's the color in the painting? And where do I want the eye to travel? That's what I want to think about. So typically what I'll do is I'll have a bunch of these, just little elements. I have a green one here. So now we have kind of, green and green. We have high chrome in the background. We also have green olives with the green background. So we have a connection between those two as well. We also have blue, and blue and green are next to each other on the color wheel. So they're analogous. We have a lot of different things that I can play with. Here's another one. Here's just transparent earth red, PR101 by, I believe, Gamblin or Michael Harding. And I'll put that in the background too. So what I'll usually do at this stage is kind of like, once you get an idea of what the composition possibly is, I'll then take and put a bunch of different elements in the background, start to play with it. Now back to those foam core boards. I take those foam core boards and I put them up over the top. They actually take it to another place. They make nice and dark in the background. The light is coming down and striking the martini, almost like it were a performer in a theater play. So I can also play with these now. The reason why I have 2 of them is one can stay stable in the background and this one can kind of move in and out. You can see this is when you get playful with the light and when things start to, just really be dark in the background and then this merges into the light, it gets a nice amount of depth. Now, classical painters tend to make things a little darker, but doesn't mean you have to. You could do a celebration of color. I've done a ton of different cocktail paintings, and in that way of thinking, I've just done a light backgrounds, dark backgrounds, high chroma backgrounds, low chroma backgrounds. Here we have just transparent earth red. So I'm going to take these down. I don't think I'm going to go here. I'm going to put this one back up. So I think that's where I'm going to go, which is just going to be a nice element of thinking about a little bit of color popping out of a dark background. Just so it's not black, it actually has a bit of life to the color. Now, another way to do this too is to, I went on Amazon and I bought a bunch of cloths. This is a red cloth, this is an orange cloth. We also have a turquoise cloth here too. I'll take a piece of masonite. It's also sometimes called yucca board if you buy it at Home Depot like I do. Then I'm just going to put it right up over the top of the board and let it sit back. Now I just can see quickly what red would do. Now there's a beautiful connection between the red pigmento and the background. But is that what the feature of this is? Red is a dominant color, so I'm not quite sure that's kind of where I want to go with this. Here's also another color. This one's turquoise. Not quite sure that's where I want to go either. Now it feels a bit more tonal, where it's more in the blue-green kind of family. So what I'll do is, normally what I'll do is I'll play with it. I'll play with, you know, what do all these colors do? They do something different to it. And you may come in to your setup with an idea. Now we have almost like complementary colors here with the blue and the orange, depending on which wheel that you use. Yellow would be a traditional color wheel's complement, but you can see that every color is kind of taking it to a different place. High chrome in the background is going to take it somewhere else as well. And the other thing is, I also have a bunch of different woods or pieces of wood. Take this, bring it over here now. So we also have just different wood colors. Again, I just have a bunch of things that I have in my studio here. Then we have another piece of just wood. Now we have just an old piece of rusted wood, which is, again, a beautiful look, but for the demonstration, I'm going to actually make a nice dark background. I have to be aware of time. So time is always, I think, a thing that should be considered when we're painting. And to be able to get painting done in time or over 4 sessions, I'm going to go with a dark background, make it a little bit easier to do. So once I get there and I have that, I'm going to just put this back up. I think this is kind of where I'm going to be. What I'll then begin to do is just play with just how the light is going to strike it. So what's the dark background? I know that's where I want to go. Nice, beautiful kind of look there. And all this stuff. And the other component is that if you have a light and it can move, I'll then put it on a tripod and I'll play with it. So there's a light, and light and shadow kind of interact and create different patterns. So one thing I want to be aware of is just, where do I want the light to fall? Some artists will actually put it right up over the top. But I actually don't mind that. But I also didn't mind it over here either. There's something beautiful about that. So probably go with, sometimes if you have a light and it's in the same place every time, that can be quite nice, but it also can get a little boring. everything's always lit the same way. I just like a bunch of different varieties. So one thing I do want to think about as I'm proposing here, just going to take a pen, see if I can get a little bit of that pimento to just show, so that there's a little bit of color in the glass. So another component of this with the light is to think about just the Kelvin of the light too. So I have a light on it right now and it's actually quite warm. I'm gonna turn that one off and I'm gonna turn on my other light. Now this light has the ability to change temperature. So as you can see, here's a very warm light. This is actually 2300 Kelvin. This is about 3,300 Kelvin, which is typically what I'll paint under. And then we can shift it through Kelvin space, which is the measurement of the temperature. So that's actually a neutral light of 5,000. Here we have 6,000. Then we have 6,800. Now that's very cool light as opposed to this being very warm. So to actually get it around 3,300 Kelvin's my temperature of choice. And then you can also play around with, if you do have a light that has the ability to dim and then dim it, that's a little too light. Or bring the dimmer up. That's at full. So another component to play around with. If you do have a light that has the ability to change Kelvin and also a percentage of how much light is actually on. So the next step for me is I will take photos of the setup with different color schemes. And as you can see here, I have many of them. The reason why I take photos is it gives me the ability to kind of look back on it throughout the day. I like to set up my painting if you have the time and then walk away and then kind of come back to it. And by taking photos with different color schemes, it basically makes it so that I can reflect on it throughout the day. So as you can see here, this is with the orange background. This is orange background with the cover on the top to make it darker. Each one of these is just going to give it a different feel. Here we have green in the background. We have green with the cover. So it again, you can see the difference between these two is that this focuses on the color in the background. Contrast is usually where the eye will go to. And then for something like this, we're actually going to focus more on the martini and the objects when we have a darker background like that. We have the purple violet background. And again, I'll just kind of set different colors in the background just to kind of see what the feeling of the composition is. This one's actually quite nice too, because it is a very neutral background, but it actually connects all of these colors together too. Here we have red. It actually is appearing a little bit more towards violet, but red is going to take it somewhere else. Red is a very emotional color, and I think this painting becomes more about red than it becomes about the martini. Adding the dark cover helps it out, but again, that red is still deep and rich, and it may take us away from kind of where we want. So this is the one I ended up going with. Again, before, that's one without the cover. Harder to see some of this information here, so we focus more on these objects. But with the cover, it actually makes it so we can focus on the martini. So once I have all that, what I'll then begin to do is take my setup and then think about it in different ways. So now you can see I actually open the jar, so it actually fits right behind there. Before, after, just a better shot. I close the jar. And to me, sometimes what happens with a jar that's open like that, it feels almost like it's like Pac-Man or something like that, or like a hamburger, which can sometimes look like a face talking. So what I've do is play around with just kind of movement. I've also taken and put one olive over here, two over on the other side. And that just makes it so that there's a little bit of a movement throughout the whole composition as well. This is the final composition where I took this and I put it right behind. I think it actually gives nice flow and depth. And then objects all feel like they're connected. So that was the original one with the two olives as I was setting it up. And as you can see, the refinement is here. So next what I'll do is I'll open this into Photoshop. And if you don't have Photoshop, you can totally just do little thumbnails. That's fine as well. You can also sketch this out and figure out the composition later if you wanted to by doing a drawing first. This is one of the ways that I like to work. So I'm just going to create a new document here. I'm going to make it 6 by 8. So I know that I want my painting to be 8 inches tall by 6 inches wide. This is just a stock frame that I have. So sometimes I'll actually paint into it with that in mind. And then what I'm going to do is just grab this and say, how does this compositionally fit into this space? And this, it's not like it's cheating or anything. You're just, I'm using a digital, a software program to kind of work with me to figure out how the composition is. So the good thing about this, as you can see, I put these lines up just to make sure that everything feels like it's even. And parallel. So the good thing about this is that there's room all around it. And that's one thing I definitely always want to stress is that, you know, what you could do is you could play around with it like this and then make a copy of it. And this is what I used to do too, would be to just make a copy of it and see what it looks like if you blew it up, right? So you'd have a larger painting. Larger objects in the painting. Here we go. Larger objects in the painting, but everything is going to be just a little bit closer to the edge. Now, one thing we always have to keep in mind is just, you know, when we frame this thing up, you're going to lose a little bit of an edge. It's actually called the rabbit, and you can actually account for it. So one thing I want to think about when I'm doing this is just the rabbit is about there. And let me put these all together. One layer. And if I just bring the opacity down, you would see about how much I'm gonna, you know, lose on the edge there. Now, one thing I try to do is avoid tangents. And tangents happen, you know, if we think about them in geometry, it's really when we had, you know, take something like this, and then we took something like this, do this, and then we took something like this, and then we shared an edge. That's actually what's called a tangent. And the reason why we want to avoid tangents is tangents actually will create tension in the painting. So I try to avoid them. And what I try to do is give a little bit of space between these objects, something like that, probably like a quarter or half an inch is good. So this is getting a little bit close. This is going off, so it's fine. But if it was right on the edge there, if I took this off, you'd see that that's right on that edge. And that's what I'd be trying to avoid now. Some tangents are just unavoidable. You're going to have a tangent somewhere in your composition. Try to minimize as much as you can, but be aware that they will create tension. And so avoid them. So no tangents really in the background here, no tangents really here, there's overlap there, and I'm always thinking of tangents. There's a bit of a tangent there because these two things are touching each other. There's overlap there, which is nice, that's overlap. There would be tension there, and that's why sometimes I'll actually do a painting a little bit smaller with no tangents. You can see once this thing is all framed up, I'm gonna have no tangents at all. So what you can do is take this and then bring it into a frame and even take a look at it this way. So again, if we just pop it in here, and then I say this is pretty much the way it's gonna be presented to the audience. To me, that looks good. Popping it into a frame, or even having a frame, or understanding a little bit of Photoshop can go a long way. I think it'll help to think about the whole process too. So you can see now when this pops in a frame, the last thing you want to do is have too much tangents. This actually feels a little bit crowded to me. So you can see that's the more crowded one. That's more of like, to me, the right amount of space. Again, A little bit of room on the left, a little bit of room on the right. If I did want to, push it one way or another. Now, the reason why I show this is more of like planning, kind of thinking of the end result. This is going to go in a frame. It's going to be 6 by 8. Now, what do we do? Well, I'm going to take and I'm going to approve my composition in a sense in my head. And then next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go draw it.
So here's just a time lapse. This is the poster study. All right, so that's the end of the video. There's a lot of questions too I just can't get to right now because I know that's the end of it. So I'm going to go back to presenting a slideshow, and it should answer some of the questions about what a poster study is, which I'll just elaborate on. All right, so Glenn, we can see this. So I have the drawing here. And then what I do is I'll transfer that over to a small little panel, a 4x6. I do that with almost like a carbon copy. I usually scan it into my computer, and then I'll print it out to whatever desired size I want, which really kind of goes along with what I was doing in Photoshop, so I can kind of get exact. I'll print that out, and then what I do is I'll put some oil paint on the back, and then tape it to my panel, and then use a pen as a stylus. I think I showed it earlier. It's in the book, by the way. Let me just go back and show. I don't exactly know what page, but it's right here. Transferring a preliminary drawing. I'll see if I can find that page number for anybody interested in what that is. But yeah, so there's the study in the middle, 6 by 4 inches, and typically I don't always do a study for a 6 by 8 or 8 by 6 painting, but this was a demonstration for my class. So I was showing them how to work out their idea visually. A poster study is a fantastic way to do it because it's basically spending time with the composition to see if it's worth it to do on a bigger scale. 8 by 6 is not all that much bigger. Typically I do this when I do large work. So. All right, so that's that for the setup and the demonstration. Let's get into the announcing of the still life. However, you can keep your questions and carry them over into the Q&A at the end for that. I did answer, I think, a lot of them in the chat. All right, so the other half of why we're here today is to announce there's a still life competition. So when I got together with Trekell, yeah, party, grab your drink. Opa. So announcing a still life competition. It begins today, February 18th, and the 2-year anniversary of the book, and it ends on March 31st, 2022. Here's the details for it. So paint any size, any still life setup you'd like. No size requirements at all. You can paint from life or you can paint from a photo. I prefer painting from life, but I've painted from photos, as I think said earlier. Submit as many painting as you'd like to. I checked with Courtney on this one, and she did that with the pet painting or pet portrait painting. I don't know what it was called. What's going to happen is I'm going to award 3 prizes. I'm the judge and the jury and the president and the treasurer and all that good stuff. So I will judge each painting and choose the first, the second, and the third place winner. Here's what the prizes are. First place is $500 gift card to Trekell. I would imagine you're all here because you buy their supplies. A signed copy of The Art of Still Life. If you already have one, give it to a friend. And a signed print. So that's the print on the bottom right. I got a print of the entomologist. I believe it's 12 by 18, which is the size of the original painting. Second place is $250 gift card, gift certificate to Trekell, a signed copy of The Art of Still Life and a signed print. And then third place is $150 gift certificate to Trekell, a signed copy of The Art of Still Life and a signed print. Here's how to submit. There's going to be a form to submit. I thought it was actually going to be in their banner, but it's actually not. I think Alyssa, Kalina?
Hi, it is in their banner.
Oh, it is in their banner.
It's in their banner, and I'm actually putting a link to it right now in the chat.
Hey, there you go. That's how good we are. Thanks, Kalina. Yeah, so that's how you submit. It's not that it's going to go away tomorrow. It'll be there all the way up till March 31st. So take your time, do something good, work out your idea, win that cash, actually gift card in a book, in a print. All right, so what you have to do if you're going to submit 3 photos of your painting. One, I need to see in the beginning stage. I need to see it in the middle stage. It doesn't have to be, nobody will get thrown out if they are not exactly in the middle. And then a final shot of your painting. And the reason for that is I need new work that you're creating now, and you're not submitting old work that you've done in the past, that you have pictures of that were shot. In each photo, you must have a piece of tape below the painting or something to just show. You could write it on Sharpie or whatever you want. Something that shows that it was a painting at a certain time with your name and the date on it, like this. So here's a painting that I did at the early stage, just blocking it in with pencil, and then I went through with just a liner of some burn umber. Here's the second stage, just in about the middle. It's not, nobody knows what the middle is because nobody knows how long you're going to take on these. And then the final painting. So get a really good shot of your final painting and submit at least those 3. So you have to submit all 3. The portal through Trekell won't let you submit less than 3.
Only 3.
Only 3. Only 3. Only 3. All right. So 2 progress shots and 1 final painting. The online system will not allow you to submit less than 3 or more than 3. So only 3, right? All right. And these, I believe these rules will be on Trekell's website as well. What is not accepted: previously completed paintings before February 18th, 2022, a copy of somebody else's painting, like an old master or somebody contemporary, or work that does not have the date on it. All right, so you got to put those dates. Again, this is what it looks like with the dates on it. This is from 2017, and that's the final painting. And again, this is going to be posted on YouTube, so anybody can go back and watch this after. It's over to the United States and Canada. Sorry, anybody else. That's about it for the announcement. I do teach an online still life class on Saturdays. There's also an 8-week color wheel workshop coming in June. I'll be teaching that. I think I have a lot of the students already here. Cheer me on. Thank you for the support. If you're interested, email me, toddmcasey@gmail.com. And the other thing is I'm on Patreon, which is a very relaxed way to kind of see my demos. I think I actually have this martini painting on Patreon. So for $12 a month, you'll get access to over 70 videos of me painting. All right. I think that's it. That's it for my rambling. So now we'll go to the Q&A. Clancy, do you want to talk to them about how that's going to go?
Great. Yeah. Okay. So here's what we're going to do is you're going to write your question in the chat, and then I'm going to read them and Todd's going to answer them. And our first question is that, can you submit any medium or just oils? And
Ooh.
I know the answer to that one. So
Oh.
I'm gonna go ahead and answer.
I'm going to lip sync it like I know.
Any medium, any drawing or painting medium, no digital art and no photography.
There you go.
And then the next question is, what size or resolution of photos?
Ooh, man, all these things I probably should have put in there. Look, I would say at least 300 DPI. 4x6 would be like the smallest. I could see if I can get a pixel dimension of what that is, but why don't you ask the next question? I'll see if I can get that answered.
How do you get such straight lines? Do you use any tools?
I don't use tools. I don't think there's a problem with using tools, by the way. Yeah, this one is 6x4 at 300 DPI. Let me just look at the pixels. So I'd say 1800 on the widest, and then whatever that translates to on the shortest. 300 DPI at 1800 pixels. The closing date is March 31st, 2022, probably 11:59 Pacific Coast time. I don't use a ruler. Plenty of people use rulers and stuff like that. I used to be a sign painter when I was in high school. So I guess I have a steady hand. I probably do if I was doing lettering. But I don't know, something about it, I try to just get it. I'm okay if it's a little wonk.
Can the painting be something that you're in the middle of right now?
If you don't have that beginning shot, then I'd say no.
Do you use any fast drying mediums?
I don't use any mediums. The only thing I will sometimes add is oil, like stand oil. And that's just to try to go to the fat over lean kind of concept. There's just a ton out there that, you know, from my reading, there's just a differing of opinions. And because I sell through my gallery, I don't want people coming back to me in 10 years telling me that something cracked. So I try to keep it super simple and just stick to like a little bit of Gamsol at the beginning to keep it thin. And then just oil, the oil that's in the tube. And if I need to go a little fatter, I'll grab a stand oil. Of course, there's many other oils you could grab, like walnut oil and poppy oil. And depending on the brand of paint that you have is going to dictate like what you're starting with. So I was at the art store today and I picked up a tube of Charvin, which I've never even picked up before and looked. They use poppy oil. M. Graham uses walnut oil. Most people use linseed oil. Winsor Newton uses safflower oil. Each one of those is going to have a different drying property. Also a different kind of yellowing that comes with it as well. So linseed oil is the most durable. It's going to be the most yellowing, but it dries to the strongest paint film. The second in line is walnut oil. The third in line is safflower. And the fourth is poppy. Poppy is also the slowest of them. So if you want something to take a while to dry, poppy is it for you. But you can also add secatives and retardants to kind of speed up and slow down your paints if you need to. I try to stay away from all that too, for the most part. Correct, longest side 1800 pixels.
Can it be a painting that you might put in a show or sell?
Yeah, it's just digital, so you don't have to send anything anywhere. Absolutely. I've actually won awards with paintings that, like, you know, I no longer have anymore. I actually just won one through the Portrait Society for what I sold like 3 years ago this year.
So Todd, do you ever clean that palette of yours?
I clean it every night. I clean the inside of it, and then I scrape down the outside when it gets heavy. So if it's like those piles, I shouldn't even say little piles, they're big piles. But if it gets like they're too high and they're gonna if I can't close it, then I'll scrape it down. But I'm also trying out a bunch of different colors too. Like my train of thought right now is that I may switch out cadmium yellow for Airlon because that's a cobalt yellow, and cobalt dries faster. Cadmiums are a little on the slow side, but it's more of like I have to test it out and see what the paint feels like. Everything about this is like it's a tactile sensation. That's why when I talk about oil paints, I think there's a difference between inorganic and organic, because you can feel just the difference. You can feel the minerals in like cadmiums, and especially in like burnt umber. I'm not going to dork out. Kalina usually try to keep me from doing that too much.
If you do want to hear Todd dork out about color and different pigments, join his color wheel class. We talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So is there a specific theme for this contest?
There is not. And, when we were putting this together, me, Courtney, and Alyssa, I don't know if Alyssa ever gets any credit, but Alyssa is behind the scenes doing a lot for Trekell. So the three of us got together and we were trying to think of, should we have a theme? Because the basis for this was based on, the art of still life. There's no theme in the art of still life. It's a general thing. So that's why you can paint whatever you want. I think in the future, if this competition goes well, like the response is good, we're going to do a themed one, I think, in the future, because there's a bunch of, and I get another themed book coming out in the fall. So we may be doing cocktail if you want to do it.
I've got brand of paint, and what's a good brand of oil paint if you're just starting out?
My suggestion is don't buy student grade. I remember one of the earlier workshops I went to where everybody had student grade, and it was a nightmare to try to get the paint to do what I was trying to teach. So I would avoid student grade, pay the extra cost. The good thing about paying the $1 or $2 more, $3, I know it's a lot of paint sometimes depending on who your instructor is and how many you have to get, but these paints will last so much longer. They also don't have fillers in them. So a lot of the time they'll try to make them cheaper by adding things like aluminostyrate, and it makes the tinting strength a little bit lower. But there's also other fillers that they could be adding, like I believe chalk. There's a whole thing in Ralph Mayer's book where he talks about all the fillers. We actually talk about it because when I wrote the Oil Painter's Color Handbook, which I wrote like a year ago now, and I went to Michael Harding after, and then we talked about like what some of these. So he was the one I leaned on, him and Robert Gamblin, for advice on like, hey, you're the experts on this. This is what I know, and then they helped me kind of refine the text. But there are also two brands that I really love. So Gamblin and Michael Harding are two, to me, really good paint manufacturers.
Awesome. How long does it usually take you to complete maybe an 8x10 from idea through the setup to the finish?
It depends on the complexity of a painting. A 6x8 I used to crank out in a day, and it's not bragging. It's more of like I got myself up to being able to do that. 8x10s, if it's if there's like text on a label for a cocktail, that's something that could set you back. So it really depends on the setup, but I'd say generally I like to spend at least 2 days on a painting at the minimal, so I can come back the next day and then see it with fresh eyes and then adjust. I'd say an 8x10, maybe 3 to 4.
And do you let it dry in between each layer?
I do. There's definitely some effects that you can get from direct painting, which I love. And that's why, in the classes, as Kalina knows, she's in the still life class, and my monitor for that. We do direct, we do indirect, we do both. I'm not one to say what everyone's painting should look like. Should they be loose? Should they be tight? It can be whatever you want to. And I try to help people guide the people wherever they want to go between those two. There are pros and cons to both. Working wet into wet builds unity. It also softens the edges. indirect painting can sometimes feel like perhaps it's a bit more crisp and the edges are harder. But there are ways to kind of work around both.
Great. What type of wood is your palette and do you treat it?
I use an open box M. I actually hate to even recommend that at this time because I know so many people went to buy them and it took like 3 to 6 months. Somebody waited for a year. Hopefully they're better at it, and it's fantastic. I've had it for over 10 years now. So you'll buy one good one and it will last. I think it's just a Baltic birch, a really good Baltic birch, hardwood. Could be wrong, but open box M is what I use.
And do you treat it?
I don't. I just get it dirty and then you just keep pushing the oil into the surface and then eventually it will get shiny.
What was the name of the cobalt yellow brand? Wait, sorry. What was the cobalt yellow brand and name that you are thinking about using?
The brand Airlon, I believe. I have a Holbein. It's not it used to be common. It's not as common anymore. It's common in watercolor, I think, because it's a bit transparent. But I don't think Gamblin makes one. I think Michael makes one, Michael Harding. So I'll probably start with Michael. But I also tip into like Williamsburg sometimes or Natural Pigments and try them out. And each one has their pros and cons. Like Natural Pigments puts no binder in their oil paint. So I think the shelf life isn't as long. So it depends on how long it's going to take you to go through a tube of paint. But it also could separate a little bit. Where Michael Harding puts 2% wax in his, and that keeps it together. That's actually another reason why some people will use aluminostyrate. I think it holds the paint together so that the oil and the pigment don't separate. I also have powdered Orlon. I don't even know if I say it right, cobalt yellow. But it is one of the ones, if you're on Instagram, that I put up there. I was like, what's this yellow? You saw it. Kelly waving her finger.
Do you have a favorite brush set or size and shape of brushes that you typically use in a piece?
I'd say I usually go to rounds, but I do love flats. I use Spectrum by Trekell. God, is Courtney here? She could probably fact check me. Know what I always order.
There's
I think
also,
I'm here. Do you want me just to, we have your brush set.
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, what's in it?
I'm pulling it up right now. Let's see here.
I think it's these days I've been switching to a number 8 Spectrum, I think, around, and I don't even know if that's in the set.
Yeah, we have you have hog bristle rounds, you have Spectrum rounds, you have and an opal long flat. So yeah, you use the Spectrum 4, 6, and 8 rounds.
Cool. Okay. And we're putting together a bigger set eventually, right? With like my name on it and all that fun stuff.
Correct. As soon as you're ready for it.
Yeah. Well, the thing with me is just like my palette, I switch. Once I try something out, I'll switch so much that I have commitment issues. It's all good. I'll commit.
Don't tell your wife that.
I know. Well, the door's closed. She can't hear.
And Courtney has also put in the chat the Todd 10, or what is can you put the code in again for the 10%?
Yeah, it's TKC10, but I'll put it back in.
Awesome. Let's see, what else do we have? Is your color theory book available yet, or is that coming out in the fall too?
That will be out in November. It kept getting pushed. COVID didn't help it. We are just at the final stages right now of me looking through the book and then just making edits. It's the longest book. The first one took 4 to 5 months. This one took, I think, 6 to 7 months to write, but it took way longer to edit. So we're almost there. It looks good though. I was surprised because I don't design them. And then when the designer brings it back, I'm always like, hey, you put my mess into an order. So it looks good. And then it's, you can kind of see the word and image together, which is the way in which, I'm used to working. Hey, Dorothy's here. Hey, Dorothy.
And Todd, where's the best place to buy The Art of Still Life?
I was notified yesterday that it's in the fourth printing now, which I'm, honored that many people have bought it. I thought my mom would be the only one to buy it, maybe like 2,000 times, but it's sold out 3 times now. We're in the 4th printing, and I think Amazon should have it. However, if you hate Amazon, I think there's alternatives like anybody can add to this in the chat, by the way, for like local, but Book Depository, I think, is an international one. Books A Million is another one. Barnes and Nobles, of course, is a large one. Abe Books is another good one. Strand Books, if you're in New York City. I actually did a talk at Strand, and then they had a bunch of signed ones. I don't think they have them anymore. I'm actually getting some too, so if you want a signed copy, shoot me an email, and I should have my books here in like a week or 2.
We
Feel
know how
free
much
to
you
add
love
to the
going to the
chat.
store.
What's that?
We know how much you love going to the post office.
I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah. If you follow me on Facebook, you probably heard the shipping a painting to New York City, and it took a trip 5,000 miles west to Hawaii. Very effective.
All right, Todd, what's your go-to surface to paint on?
I love birch panels. I think that's the only thing I really paint on these days. I have painted with some linen, and I tend to paint sometimes the big stuff on linen. There's a pro and a con to every surface that you paint on. Aluminum dye bond is the strongest and I don't even know if I'd say the best. There's so much to consider with all of it. If my painting stinks, I want to be able to burn it in a fire pit. I joke about that all the time to my class, but what do you do with a painting on like metal? Like, I don't even know how you get rid of it. Throw it in a volcano if one's around. So the birch panels are good because you could burn them after. It's not good to paint over like a bad painting. So it's a hard surface. I prefer cradled, and Trekell sells cradle panels, they're going to keep them nice and firm. Linen is good too, but the thing with linen is that it's going to expand and contract depending on the moisture in the air. So you want to be aware. So birch panel.
How do you
My
prepare
final
those?
answer.
Go ahead, finish.
No, my final answer.
How do you prepare those birch panels?
I use GAC 100 by Golden, and then I usually put Liquitex gray gesso, but I'm starting to switch over. Michael Harding finally just came out with a gray gesso. He also has a bunch of other ones too. So he sells non-absorbent gesso, which is fantastic because acrylic will suck the oil into out of the paint into the surface. So I'm starting to switch over to that. The thing with Harding's is that it's a little bit lighter than what I'm used to. So there's going to be a give and take, or a conversation with Michael to see if he can make a neutral 5.
Which contemporary artists do you admire?
They're all in the book. When it comes time to write a book, the good thing about it is that I can introduce myself to other people that I admire. So, some of them I study with, like Travis Schlott and Kate Lehman were 2 people that I was like, this is a dream team to study with. Sadie Valeri, I love her work. I thought of her right away when I thought of The Art of Still Life. Trying to think of other ones. Jeff Larson, he's peppered throughout the book too. And I was honored that, when I even called these people up, they knew who I was. So, I mean, the list goes on. There's even more than what's in the book. And every time I talk to or meet somebody who I feel like should have been in the book, then I let them know. Like Julie Beck, every time I see her, I'm like, you should have been in the book. I wish I knew you a little earlier. There's a big balance of what happens when putting a book together too. It's not like I just write it and then I call these artists up and then they send it over. I have to find a spot for them. But for the most part, that's who's in the book.
Awesome. What's the difference? Wow. Let's try that again. What are the differences you notice between Gamblin and Michael Harding paints?
I think every brand of paint is different. You know, the way in which paint is made is it's milled, and sometimes people, well, manufacturers will mill it a little bit different, and you know, every pigment is different too. You may have the same CIN number, but that to me is the beauty of it, is just that like the same CAD red is not the same through Michael and Robert Gamblin. And finding that, I think the textural element of it, think about like is almost like food. It's like there's a textural element, I think, of painting that's the tactile sensation of, you know, I need something like alizarin, which is almost like painting with jelly. And then there's something dense and firm about like a cadmium, for the most part, cadmiums. So I think Michael's are a little bit maybe buttery, or slicker. And then Gamblin's, depending on which color. So for instance, Burn Umber by Michael Harding is PBR 7. And he uses a synthetic iron oxide. So it's a Mars color. It's going to feel a little different than a natural iron oxide, which is pretty much, it feels like dirt. So Michael's and Roberts are going to give you a different in terms of like what the texture is. And when it gets into painting, that's what I'm trying to do on the canvas, but then also in feeling the paints as I put them on. So I think that there's a place for all of them. I can't buy every brand to try them, because that's when it gets super complicated. There are a few brands I wouldn't go to, and I will never tell anybody what those are, because I'm not going to start any battles.
Good idea. Let's see. A good book about color mixing until yours comes out.
You know, the reason why I write these books is that, you know, Dorothy's actually here. She's one of the ones who was the reason why I kind of wrote The Art of Still Life. You know, we had a group that used to get together, and anytime I'm asked questions, if I don't have the answer, I have to go get it. And, you know, a lot of the questions that come up, especially in our group, was like, what's a great still life book? And I was like, I don't know. So instead of being cynical, I figured when the opportunity arose, I tried to write the book that I wanted. And that's actually the same, I think, with color mixing. I don't quite know a good one. My favorite color book right now is James Gurney's Color and Light. I love Gurney. He's in both books. He's in this new book too. But I don't really know. I mean, there's a bunch of books out there that I think are fascinating in terms of color, but I don't really know if they break it down in what I attempted to do. And I'm not fluffing myself up. I actually went and worked with Douglas Flint, who was my teacher, and him and I worked together a lot. He's kind of like, he's behind the scenes of who helped me out a ton. So we chatted almost every other week. And it's really like what we tried to do is give predictions of just like what happens. You know, for instance, if you take red and you take yellow, you can predict that you're going to get orange. But there's some times where that prediction model doesn't always work. And then that's where we came up with the assumptions and then exceptions. So what's the exception to the kind of assumption? Anybody feel free to add that in the chat, though, if you have a book. I mean, I'm always fascinated to hear. Trying to think of other color books. I bought a ton of them too, to just kind of look, and I just couldn't find one. A long answer, I guess.
Their answer is wait till Todd's book comes out. It'll be great.
I know, but that's not what I'm trying to say. It's just
I know, but
yeah, I know. I'm just trying to say I just don't think one really is great. The problem I have is that when you go into recipes, painting is not about recipes. It's about being able to articulate what you see and then replicate it in paint. But then it's also a choice. So once you can do that, then it's like, well, what do you want to do with it now? Do you want to express yourself with the color, or do you want to hit it? You know, you can go into something like the Munsell system and try to get exact, or you can be playful with your color like the Impressionists, which is more of like optical mixing together. And to think that everybody always has the same idea of what they want their paintings to look like at the end is difficult. I don't like the recipe books though, because I think the recipes teach you like everyone is the same, skin tone. It's use this color for it or something, or every tree is green. It's like, under light, as you can see in the presentation, the way in which you saw the martini changed depending on the light, the Kelvin of the light, and also the objects that were in the environment that were reflecting up into it. So I get the idea that we want to start with a base, and that's not bad, but then you have to break out and then and observe. Michael Wilcox is a fantastic book, by the way. I know somebody wrote that in the chat. And the Nita Leland book is fantastic. I'm trying to think of the ones that I was looking at when I was writing the book. Yeah, Richard Schmidt, Alla Prima, of course. Fantastic.
While you're looking for that, while you're thinking of that in your head, is there a place to pre-order your new book?
I think Monticelli is one way to do it, although Amazon always tries to beat everybody with like price. I think the pre-order price for the book right now is $40 on Amazon. So Amazon is always the easiest of them, but a lot of people hate Amazon. So try Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Monticelli.com. I think I'm going to check it right now. I think Monticelli Press has it. Monticelli Studio. I can't even find it on here. There's my old book. Give it a Google search, Oil Painter's Color Handbook. And I think you'll find a bunch. I think Target sells it in Walmart.
Wow, you're famous. What's the con for Masonite hardboard?
It's hard to say because it depends on the Masonite. I remember Gary in our class was talking about just how even hardboard is different. It's tempered. It used to be tempered on both sides. Now it's tempered on one side. It used to have, I think he said formaldehyde in it. It doesn't have formaldehyde anymore. So the conversation, I think, is being changed. Hardboard is different if you buy it at Home Depot than if you buy artist grade. I think artist grade is a little stronger. But I painted on hardboard at the beginning of my career a lot. Just because I knew a bunch of them weren't going to be great. So to keep it cheap, Home Depot sells a 8 foot by 6 foot, I think it was, of yucca board. They call it EUCA, like eucalyptus plant, for I think it was like $8. And then I would just have them cut it down. Sometimes you can pay the 50 cents per cut. They'll give you three free cuts. But you can also buy birch panels. I think birch panel is better than Masonite. But just be aware that like cradling it would be the best of all of them. Wood still warps, and it's gonna alter depending on the moisture in the air. That's why aluminum dye bond is the strongest. But you could even like glue a piece of linen to a piece of aluminum dye bond if you wanted to.
Do you ever paint using water soluble oils?
I did with the group, with Dorothy's group. I think she started with them and then switched over. So it's somewhere between oil paint and acrylic because it gets like sticky. When it comes to the cautions of oil painting, there's turpentines, there's cadmiums, there's cobalts, there's leads. There's a lot of things that are in oil paint. And if you are skeptical of that stuff, I get why, some people can switch over to water mixable. So you're getting the turpentines out of your studio, but there are precautions you can take to make it, safe. And I think everybody should do that with a window open when you paint, even if it's cold out, I do it, or cross ventilation would be the best, or you can get a system put in your studio that would kind of pull it out, all the vapors. Leads, things like that, be careful, don't sand your paintings. just be cautious. There's a lot of writing out there. And I think Gamblin, one of the reasons why I love Gamblin so much is that their website is full of stuff. Like they have the Munsell notations for every one of their colors you could find on there if you're into the Munsell system. So they just have a ton of good stuff to offer. Michael Hardings is getting better too. I think he has a great website. But the other thing with Gamblin is you call them up and you can have a conversation. So you could just say like, hey, I want to talk to you about alkyds or something like that. And they'll make an appointment and they'll talk to you, which I love. They actually spoke to me for like 2 hours when I was writing The Art of Still Life. And I don't think they knew who I was. I don't even think I am anybody, but they didn't know, I was just like, hey, I'm writing a book and I need some information. So.
Do you ever paint, do you ever use an acrylic underpainting?
No, the thing with acrylic, the only thing I'll do is use acrylic gesso. I don't think there's any problem with it. But the thing is that I think it's acrylic is polymer, is that you do want to make sure that you have the right amount of time to let it dry. I think for the most part, people use acrylic to speed up some aspect of it. But I'm pretty sure that acrylic paints takes about 24 hours to dry before you should paint over it. And if you're trying to speed it up, there's nothing wrong with even doing like a natural iron oxide underneath your oil painting, which would dry in probably about the same amount of time. So I've never really seen the value if you are going to wait. I know gessos are 24 hours. It says that on the side of the bottle. And I believe that's the same with the paint.
Great. Sorry, I got lost in looking for questions.
You're doing great.
Will gessoing the back of a birch panel help prevent any potential future warping?
Yeah, the thing with protecting all sides of it. So GAC 100 is almost like the modern day version of like what rabbit skin glue is. So the best you can do is to put GAC 100 down first. There's also GAC 200, 300, 400, and I think they have 500. And they're all different versions of, I believe, a resin, acrylic polymer. There's something basically that's protecting it. It's getting away from rabbit skin glue, which was a sizing. So you're essentially doing a new version of a sizing, which is really a firewall. The reason why it's good to do both sides of it is that the number one culprit for oil paintings, besides moisture in the air, is also water. So when things get wet, especially from the back, they can start to deteriorate. And, sealing anything in the back is always a good idea. And it will straighten it out too, because acrylic contracts when it dries. So the difference between oil is that oil does not have any water in it. That's why we shouldn't really say that oil paint dries. It polymerizes, it oxidizes. So it changes from an oil into a paint film, and it oxidizes over about 200 years. It oxidizes fast at the beginning and then it slows way, way down. There's water in acrylic paint, which is why it dries. So it's more of like, we talk about these things and we say oil paint dries, but it would be the wrong kind of verbiage. I don't know if I should ever be correcting anybody on the right.
Sorry. I should have been muted for that laugh. My bad.
Oh, that was a loud one.
How are the ACM panels with linen canvas over them?
Those are good. The thing is, when it comes to what you want to paint on, I would say buy a handful of different textures and try them out, because oil prime is going to feel different from acrylic primed. You can have a portrait linen, you can have a bigger weave. Some people used to paint on, burlap, So, and then I have a friend, Rodney, his is like smooth as glass. So he actually takes and he'll sand it down to this fine, you almost feel like the paint's just going to drip right off it. But it all depends on where you are and what feels right to you. The worst is when you're not prepared for something to be super slick and then it's super slick. And then from the first brushstroke, you're just like, what am I doing? I don't know. You feel like you lost some superpower and you're like, I can't paint anymore. So try them all out back in the day, I think, you know, I'm pretty sure I still do it, Courtney. I'll still just buy random things and try them out, like the oil prime versus acrylic prime versus, I usually prime them all myself these days just because I like to play with the texture.
Speaking of that, do you like white, gray, or clear gesso?
Gray, almost always gray. White is tough, and it depends on what your outcome is. There's a pro and a con to everything. Now, if we think about what happens with white is it reflects light, right? And black absorbs light. That's why actually titanium white pigment reflects 97% of light. So it's actually a color. For anybody who says that it's perfectly neutral, it's not. Robert Gimmelin actually would suggest that it's perhaps perfectly neutral, but there's a linseed oil mixed in with it, which could give it that 3%. I haven't read or gone down the rabbit hole enough to know. When it gets to white grounds, what happens with that is that you can imagine the light's going to bounce off it, right? It's just like a white shirt like this. Perfect for the summertime, even though I wouldn't wear a sweatshirt, but black is going to absorb all that heat. So you have to think of the ground in the same way. If you put paint over it and the paint is transparent, it's going to go through the paint film and bounce up almost like a light coming through a sheet of film, right? Where black is going to absorb all that light. So the way in which you're going to start to think of these colors is different. And, you know, what's so funny?
I'm sorry, I read one of the questions and I laughed out loud. I apologize. I thought I was muted.
Oh, Antonio's question is how tall are you?
Yes.
Yeah. So what you want to do is think of color complex. So if you're outside and you're doing landscape painting, if I wanted to try to capture more of the way that light transmits through a sunset or a sky, there's nothing wrong with white. And that's actually, when you put it on really thin, you can get the light to go through the paint film and then bounce off the ground to appear even more intense. So the way in which there's so much that's complex about the way in which we see color. There's mass tone, there's undertone. Mass tone means if I squeezed out like a big glob of a color, and undertone would mean if it's on thin, almost like if I smeared the edge, you'd see that sometimes it picks up like it almost appears like a different color. And then there's glazing, which is another idea. So there's pros and cons to white versus black versus gray. I go mid-tone, almost like a drawing, and then I build from the middle out in that sense. A long way to answer it. You know how tall I am, Antonio. You're taller than I am.
So Todd, are those some of the things you talk about in your new book?
I do. I actually go into white ground, black ground, but we have to keep in mind that, you know, the book is just like the Art of Still Life. It's a bunch of ideas that are together. I don't go down a rabbit hole because each one of the chapters in the Art of Still Life could have been its own book. So I actually took the color chapter and then I expanded it. But even in that, it's like I could do a whole book on color mixing, you know, like show all these predictions and stuff like that. So it's a bit of, it starts with like a color wheel, how to make a color wheel, which is what my workshop is about. Basically making a light to dark version of every color, painting with color strings, as we'd call it. You know, I have to remember what's in it. I look at this all the time, but I wasn't prepared for the palettes, the complexity of a palette. So basically, if you had 4 colors, like the Zorn palette, another hot topic these days, if you follow me on IG or Facebook. So if you paint with 4 colors, you have a small gamut, and that's actually good sometimes because you'll actually build harmony in your painting. But if you have a lot of colors, you could actually plot them on a wheel and then connect them through lines and say, this is about the range of color that I could get. So what I do is in the book, I take all artists' different palettes throughout the history, not every, of course, but common colors that were back in the Renaissance, the Baroque, the French academic tradition, the American Impressionists, the French Impressionists, and then some modern palettes like Carrie Dunn's palette, I think, is in there, and Kate Lehman's palette, Jerry Weiss, and then someone like John Singer Sargent's palette, Turner's palette. So it's like a mix of like, here's just the different variables of each color, each artist palette. In addition to that, I go into how to read a paint tube. So what what's a CIN number? What is all the information telling you? Pigments throughout history. So again, it kind of ties back to that of like, you know, Rembrandt painted with smalt or possibly lapis lazuli. He didn't have ultramarine blue, which we have, the synthetic or French ultramarine, if you want to call it, that we do now. So there's just a bunch of different variables that kind of pepper through the book and different ways of thinking about color. The big thing with the book is that color is, we talk about it almost like it overlaps between light perception and color mixing, and they don't always overlap. And that's the common thread that I'm trying to get through the book. I also go into light, I'm trying to think of other chapters too in the book. I don't know.
Do you use transparent white?
I don't. Most transparent whites are like a zinc white, and unless there's another one that you're talking about, like Permalba. Feel free to.
I don't know. Not sure.
What happened was, like, if you think of the history of white pigments, is that most people use lead white all through history. And there's other ones that have kind of been in there, but lead white has been the strongest. It actually is the strongest paint film. So lead white, and then it went to zinc white. So lead, of course, has, you know, if you sand it down to a dust, then you don't want to ingest it. And Michael Harding said that the reason why kids used to eat paint chips is lead white, is that it tastes sweet. So like, that's why they would want to go and eat it. So once we moved away from lead, we went into zinc. Now zinc oxide dries to a brittle film, and, you know, go on natural pigments, and there's all kinds of writing about it too. Small amounts of zinc are not so bad in the oxide version. There's also a thing called porcelain white by Williamsburg, which is barium sulfite. Now I'm dorking out with barium sulfite with zinc sulfide, which is a stronger paint film than zinc oxide. We moved away from zinc, and then we went towards titanium. I think in about 1919 is when it started to become manufactured. Now I'm really dorking out, Jesus, giving numbers. So now it's like titanium white is so easily accessible that everybody uses it, but the properties of each one of those are totally different. Zinc is transparent. Titanium white is super high tinting strength and opaque for the most part. And then lead is actually the most yellow of them, and it feels more like somewhere in the middle. I think it's considered semi-opaque, and it can feel stringy depending on who makes it and how they make it. The old Dutch stack method was I'm not going to dork up that bad, but the old Dutch stack method is very expensive to buy. Michael Harding sells it. It's like $65 a tube, but it's different from the way in which they'll make it in a manufacturing plant. Permalba is supposed to be a mixture of titanium and zinc. And that's why it's like they're trying to balance each other out with the right amount of mixture. So I don't particularly use Permalba, but I know a lot of artists that do. I know, I'm pretty sure Richard Schmidt did. So I would never argue with him.
And Todd, our last question today is going to be, how do you dispose of your lead and Gamisol soiled rags? What do you do?
Yeah, I have a red garbage. You can get it on, I think Uline. They're like $60 or $70. I have an old house from 1847, and we think about anything. We don't want any kind of fire starting here. The thing with oil and rags is that it can spontaneously combust. Norman Rockwell actually, I think, had it happen because he did a funny little thing where he did an illustration after of him running away from his studio, burning on fire. It happened when we were at Jake's studio once too. There was a fire that happened, and then he had to put it out. So be very careful about getting oil into your rags. That's why carpenters will douse them with water and then store them in a bin. So the fireproof bin is what I'd recommend. Once you get past that, I have a garage over here. I actually asked them last time I was in there, can I get rid of these guys? And they said, of course you can. So I think for $5 or $10, I could give them like a big garbage bag full of rags. What they do with them, hopefully is the right thing, but they'll probably just throw them in a dumpster. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give anyone's name of who that place is, of course, but hopefully they do the right thing. I don't wear gloves when I paint. You know, from what I've read and when talking to Robert Gamblin, most of these cadmiums have a fused metal to them. So cadmium red has selenium, I believe, or sulfur. A lot of them have aluminum. Depending on what the metal is that it's fused with, it makes the particle size bigger. So for the most part, they can't get into your pores. And I actually was looking this up not too long ago because somebody else asked something from similar. And Robert worked for the Smithsonian for years with the conservators there too, which is where I think Gamvar came out of, like conservator or like their synthetic picture varnish. So when he said that, I was like, oh, cool. Well, I don't have to I still want to be careful, but I could just wash it off my hands at the end of the day. So of course, don't eat when you're painting. Don't put your brush in your mouth, which I do sometimes in my stupid videos when I'm filming. But be very careful if you're going to work with cadmiums, cobalts, and stuff like that. You don't want to ingest them. Galena?
Nothing. You're great. Don't lick the paint.
Yeah, well, just be careful. There's nothing wrong with wearing gloves, or an apron. I should do that every time, but everything turns into paint clothes for me.
Awesome. And we have our brush set winner, right?
Did you pick him?
I did.
All right. You want to announce it and then we'll wrap up?
Marta Gomez, are you still here?
You can unmute yourself if you are. Should we take a look over in the chat or go down to M? Yeah, still here. So Marta, you win.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here.
There you are. Cool. All right, everyone.
Excellent.
Well,
Congratulations.
thank you so much for taking the time.
What should she do?
Yeah, if she can just send me a direct message to the Trekell Art Supplies Zoom account right now, and I will get her email address so we can make sure we get everything over to her.
So many familiar faces. It's so awesome to see you all. There was almost 200 people here. I'm amazed that you took the time to listen to me ramble. Thank you all. Courtney, is there anything you want to say?
I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching this. It was a lot of fun. And like I mentioned in the chat, we will be sending out a follow-up email that has all this information in it. There'll be a discount code in there. The link to the contest will be there. If they have any questions, they can follow up with emails, but just be on the lookout for that.
There was a few of you. Yeah, there was a few of you that sent me direct messages and I just couldn't get to them. It's too hard to send direct messages back while we were live. So shoot me an email and I'll get back to you if you have any of those questions. I'd be happy to answer anyone who felt like they didn't get their question answered.
And then, yeah, and I just, I don't see Marta's email address. Marta, if you can, send that to a direct message or email info@trekell.com.
All right, everyone. Thank you again. Honored you took the time. It's happy hour somewhere. Go get a cocktail.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Take care, everyone.